He said it without looking me in the eye. Just left the keys on the hook and muttered, "You'll work the farm alone today. I'll call from the airport." Then the screen door slammed and the house was quiet again. It wasn't the words. I've heard worse from Daniel over the years. It was the ease with which he said them, like I was some hired hand he'd leave in charge while he jetted off to Seattle. I didn't say anything as he left. Maybe I should have. But there comes a point in your life when your silence becomes the only way to keep your dignity. I stood in the kitchen for a while after he drove off, sunlight cutting through the blinds like ribbons. The smell of coffee he never finished still hung in the air. On the table lay a sheet of yellow paper, his handwriting sharp and hurried. Water the east field. Call the feed supplier. Check the fence by the West Creek. Cattle keep getting out. Don't forget the barn light. It's shorting again. I folded the note and slid it into the drawer, the same one where I kept the list his father once used 30 years ago. Only back then, we worked side by side. Back then, Daniel was still a boy who ran through rows of corn barefoot, chasing grasshoppers and yelling, "Mama, look!" Now he flies first class and tells me what to do with the land my husband and I broke our backs for. The house felt heavier after he left, like his presence had sucked all the air out of it and left behind only the dust. I walked to the front porch and sat in the rocker. James built the summer before the droughts. The wood creaked like old bones. It matched mine. He'd only been home 3 days. 3 days of rushed dinners and lectures about how we should start thinking long-term. He'd walked the property like a banker doing inventory, clicking away on his phone, taking photos. He called the tractor outdated. He said, "Land like this is worth more than you think, Ma. You're sitting on equity, not soil." I'm not sure when he started talking like that. Maybe it was after business school. Maybe it was after his second divorce. Maybe it was when he stopped calling me Mama and switched to Ma, like I was an obligation on a checklist. The truth is, I've worked this farm alone longer than he ever remembers. James died in '93, chest clutching the steering wheel as he turned into the driveway. The coroner said it was quick. I always wondered if he knew he was dying when he saw the porch light on. Daniel was 20 then. Said he'd come home to help temporarily. He lasted 4 months before the city called him back. Something about a new job or a new girl. I forget now. It's hard to remember excuses when they all start to sound the same. But I stayed. I learned the machinery. I managed the books. I dealt with the county when the tax assessor tried to rezone us. I kept the land intact. And somehow, Daniel thinks it still belongs to him. "You shouldn't be doing this alone anymore," he said at dinner last night, spearing his salad like it offended him. "It's irresponsible. I can help you get out of this while it's still worth something." "Get out of what?" I asked, though I already knew. "This," he waved around. "This place." He said this place like it was a burden. Like the years I spent waking up before sunrise, fixing broken gates, nursing sick calves. All of it meant nothing. I didn't answer then either. My silence has always been my sharpest weapon. He doesn't know that. After the sun rose higher, I went down to the east field. The soil was dry, but not dead. We'd had a rough spring. Still, the shoots were pushing up green and stubborn, just like always. I walked the rows, ran my hand along the stalks. The breeze carried the scent of hay and dust. My body ached in that deep, familiar way, the way it always does when something's been yours too long to let go. When I got back to the house, I made tea and sat with the ledger book. Not the kind Daniel keeps on his phone, the real one, with creased pages and margins full of scribbles. I flipped through it, tracing years with my fingers. Seed orders, fertilizer costs, weather notes. There were pages written in James's hand, too. His cursive always slanted forward, like he couldn't wait to say what was next. On the last page, I wrote 2 words. No more. Daniel will call tonight. He'll expect a report. What I did, what I didn't do. He'll expect me to wait until he gets back, like a good little steward of his imaginary inheritance. But I've already called the notary. And the buyer. I may be old, but my signature still carries weight. The silence after he left wasn't peaceful. It had a sound of its own, like breath held too long. I stood in the kitchen a while longer, listening to the refrigerator hum, the ticking wall clock, the rattle of the wind against the screen door. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He was gone. For now. But his echo still lingered, not in words. He was never much for those. But in that tone of finality he'd mastered over the years, the one that said, "This is settled," even when it wasn't. I put on my work boots, the old ones with cracked leather and the soles so worn they no longer had tread. They were James's once. He had wide feet. I stuffed them with newspaper. They still fit better than the rubber-soled slip-ons Daniel had bought me last Christmas. For the garden, he said. I never opened the box. Outside, the porch steps groaned under my weight. I should have replaced them years ago, but I like the sound they make, like the house greeting me or warning me. Depends on the day. The fields stretched before me, gold and green and stubborn. A windmill turned lazily against a flat sky. Clouds hung low, slow and heavy, like they weren't sure if they meant rain or just mood. The shed door was jammed again. I gave it a sharp tug. The metal scraped like a protest. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil, rope, rust. I reached for the feed bucket, the one with the cracked handle, and lugged it toward the coop. Chickens rushed to greet me as if I were late. One pecked at my boot. Another flapped up and clucked indignantly. I scattered the feed and muttered an apology. I never talked to the birds before James died. Now I do. It's easier than talking to Daniel. I checked the east fence like he asked. The section near the creek was sagging, post rotted clear through at the base. He'd seen it 2 days ago and made a note in that same voice. You'll need to fix this before fall. As if I hadn't already known. I knelt, pulled the wire taut, wedged a rock beneath the leaning post. My knees cracked like dry branches. When I stood, a slow throb pulsed in my lower back, the kind that didn't go away anymore, just moved around depending on the weather and the work. There was a time I could do this without thinking. Before the arthritis. Before the nights where I woke up with my hands curled stiff like claws. But habit is a strange mercy. It keeps you moving when the body wants to quit. When I finished the chores, I didn't go back to the house. I walked past it, through the gravel drive, all the way to the mailbox at the road. Nothing inside but a catalog and a letter from the power company. I turned to look at the house, our house. White paint chipped along the eaves, the barn roof still missing 3 shingles since last winter's storm. James always meant to patch it. He used to say, "If I die before I fix that barn, promise me you'll make someone else do it." He didn't mean Daniel. I know that now. Back on the porch, I opened the screen door slowly. The creak echoed down the hall like an announcement. I sat at the kitchen table, took off my gloves, and poured myself some lukewarm coffee from the pot I'd left on. Then I opened the folder. It had been sitting in the drawer for months. I'd started gathering the papers last spring, not long after Daniel's second visit of the year. 2 days of clipped smiles and questions about exit strategy. That's what he called it. As if my life was a business meeting he had to get through before boarding his return flight. Inside the folder, deed papers, tax receipts, an appraisal from a neighbor's son who'd gone into real estate. He said I could make a killing. I didn't want to make a killing. I wanted to make a decision. The last document was a business card. Carla Morales, Ag Land Specialist. I met her at the farmer's market last year. She was buying squash. I was buying time. We started talking. She knew farms, not just from books. Her father was a rancher. She asked the right questions and didn't talk over me like I was some relic. She's the one I called this morning. I'd waited until Daniel's plane was in the air. I didn't want to hear his voice while I still had the sound of my own. Carla answered on the first ring. "You sure about this?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but I have conditions." She listened, wrote them down, read them back. We agreed on everything. Now I sat at the table, hands around my mug, staring at the sink where James used to whistle while washing vegetables. He'd always said, "This land's got memory." I used to laugh at that. Not anymore. The front gate squeaked, and I stood automatically, thinking maybe he'd forgotten something, his phone, his charger. But it was just the wind. For a moment, I imagined Daniel walking through the front door, phone in hand, saying, "Did you water the east field?" I pictured myself handing him the signed papers, watching the color drain from his face. But that was for tomorrow. Tonight, I'll sleep with the windows open. Let the fields hear me breathe. By morning, I was dressed before the sun, not because of nerves, but because my body woke me the way it always did, by aching. I pulled on slacks that didn't smell of soil and a blouse that hadn't been worn in 3 years. The buttons fought me a little, but I won. James used to say I was too stubborn for my own good. I always took it as a compliment. In the mirror above the dresser, I adjusted my collar and smoothed the lines around my mouth with my thumb. They didn't vanish, of course, but something in me felt steadier after doing it. At 9 sharp, I drove into town. The courthouse parking lot was already half full. The trucks lined up like cattle along the old brick wall. I walked past them with my head high and my purse clutched tight against my ribs, not out of fear, but memory. That same purse once held baby wipes and overdue utility bills. Now it held only my reading glasses and a notarized intent. Inside, the notary's office smelled like laminate and toner. I waited 5 minutes before Carla appeared in the doorway. She looked the same. Brown ponytail, no makeup, denim jacket over a business dress. Young, but not soft. She shook my hand like someone who's pulled barbed wire barehanded. "Mrs. Halpern," she said, smiling. "We're ready." I followed her into the small conference room. A long table, a water pitcher, and 3 chairs. No frills. That's what I liked about her. "The buyer reviewed your conditions," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "He's agreed to everything." I opened the folder. There it was, in black ink and legalese. The price, the acreage, the stipulation that the land remain agricultural for at least 2 generations. The clause granting me lifetime residence in the main house. The promise that the barn would never be torn down. "He's not a corporate buyer?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "No," she said. "Just a local farmer with 3 kids and a 5th mortgage. He's trying to stay afloat." "And he wants to work the land?" She nodded. "Says he's tired of watching it sit unused while hedge funds buy everything else." I reached for the pen. My hand didn't shake. Signing your name is a simple thing. But that morning, It felt like planting something new, not giving up, just shifting the route. When it was done, Carla took the folder and stood. "The funds will clear in 5 business days. You'll get a confirmation call from the title office. I'll bring the buyer around next week so you can meet." "Tell him I'll have coffee on," I said, rising. I'd like to look him in the eye. She smiled. "I think you'll like him. He reminds me a little of you." On the way out, I passed a woman I vaguely knew from church. She gave me a polite nod. I nodded back. I didn't need to explain myself. That's another thing age teaches you, how to walk away from conversations you never wanted to have in the first place. Back home, I sat on the porch and looked out over the fields. Still mine, for now. Still full of wind and sun, and all the work I poured into them. Daniel hadn't called yet. I thought he might by then. Maybe his plane landed late. Maybe he didn't feel the need to check in. He'd said, "I'll call when I get there." But what he meant was, "You'll still be here, waiting." I wasn't. Not anymore. By late afternoon, I'd packed up a box of James's old tools, the ones we kept in the mudroom, and labeled it for the buyer. They'd come in handy. The hammer still held his initials carved into the handle. I ran my thumb across them, then closed the box. In the drawer beneath the phone, I placed the signed sales papers, folded neatly, beside the envelope with my birth certificate and will, just in case. Then I sat with my tea, warm and sweet. I thought of all the times I waited for Daniel, at soccer games, in parking lots, outside courtrooms, after breakups, after promotions, after layoffs, always on the edge of his life, always ma, never mama, always useful, never invited. He never saw the woman who carried buckets twice her weight, who drove a tractor with a cracked rib, who sat up nights nursing James through chemo, then finished the harvest herself. He only saw the old woman with tired hands. But my hand still signed my name. And tomorrow, he'll learn that. I never wanted a farm. That's the truth of it. When James and I married in 1969, he had plans, big ones. Land, ag, he'd say, not farmin'. Ag. He loved the word, made it sound like a science instead of mud and muscle. I wanted a bookstore, maybe a little one with wide windows and a bell on the door. But I was 19, in love, and believed in his kind of dreaming. He bought the land a month after our wedding. 47 acres of Iowa earth, mostly flat, a little wild around the creek. The barn was leaning already. The house had 1 bathroom, no insulation, and a wood stove that smoked like it was angry. But he loved it. And because I loved him, I learned to love it too. I didn't know what it meant then. Land ownership. Not just the legal part, the soul part. The part where every inch of soil carries memory and every broken fence has a story. We built it slowly, year by year, machine by machine. One calving season, I slept in the barn for 3 nights straight. James caught pneumonia and wouldn't go to the doctor, so I had to drag him there myself, cursing him the whole way and praying under my breath. The crops failed in 77. In 83, a windstorm took the roof clean off the feed shed. That same year, I miscarried. I didn't tell many people. We buried the little blanket I'd knitted in the back field, under the oak. That land holds more than roots. It holds bones, tears, laughter, heat, the sound of Daniel's first steps in mud, squealing with delight, the time he broke his arm falling from the hayloft and James blamed himself for weeks. My husband never climbed into that loft again. We grew old in that house. We fought. God knows we fought. But we also danced, late at night, barefoot in the kitchen, James had a way of humming just enough of a tune to make me remember who I was before all the work. He died in '93, out by the shed. I found him slumped behind the wheel of the truck, still holding a receipt in his hand. The coroner said he was likely dead before the keys left the ignition. We buried him under the oak tree. The same one. After the funeral, Daniel said he'd stay to help. He did for a while. Long enough to make suggestions. Long enough to decide the farm was beneath him. Long enough to tell me to think bigger, as if I hadn't. I kept it going. I paid the taxes, learned how to maintain equipment, repaired siding, bought feed, managed debt. Some years were good, most were not. But I kept going because I didn't know how to stop. I told myself it was for James, then, later, for Daniel, for the hope that he'd someday see the value of what we built, not in numbers, but in something deeper. But he never did. Every visit he made after college felt like an inspection. He'd stand with arms crossed, scanning the field like a developer, not a son. He called it potential. I called it home. And now he wants to frame it as loss. Says I'm giving up, selling out. But I know the truth. You don't sell out when you sell on your own terms. You don't betray the land when you hand it to someone who'll kneel in it. Selling was never about money. It was about control. About not letting Daniel be the one to decide when I was done. Because I'm not done. I'll live in that house until the breath goes out of me. I'll sit on that porch and drink my tea and listen to the wind across the field. And when I go, it'll still be a farm. Still be soil beneath someone's nails, not concrete under some stranger's shoes. That's the legacy. Not what you leave behind in a bank, but what you insist be carried forward in your name. The dress smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume when I pulled it from the closet. It hadn't seen daylight since Ruthie's funeral 6 years ago. Back then, I wore it because I thought she'd have wanted me to look like someone who still believed in occasion. Today, I wore it because I needed to remember I was still a woman, not just a caretaker of someone else's past. The fabric clung tighter than I remembered. I had to breathe shallow to zip it up. But it fit. And that was enough. I stood in front of the mirror by the bedroom window and looked at myself, not for checking wrinkles, not to criticize, just to see. Hair, white as powdered snow, swept back in a tight clip. Face, weathered but steady. Hands, veined and honest. Nothing young left in me, but plenty alive. I added the pearl pin James gave me on our 25th anniversary. He'd saved for weeks to buy it. Back then, he could barely hide the price tag. Real pearls for a real woman, he'd said, cheeks red as apples. It glinted now under the morning light like a quiet defiance. In the kitchen, I packed a small tin of oatmeal cookies, my own recipe, not sweet enough for Daniel. He always wanted everything glazed and frosted, like life owed him dessert. The drive to town was short, familiar. Every turn held memory. That tree near Miller's Creek? That's where Daniel ran into a mailbox on his first driving lesson. The old grain silo outside Dubois Road? I once painted over its graffiti at midnight with a paintbrush and a flashlight, too proud to let people see it vandalized. Now all of it was background. I was headed somewhere specific, with intention. The diner Carla had picked for the meeting was just off Route 7. Modest, worn, the kind of place that serves eggs with real yolks and doesn't bother listing calories. I parked 2 spots away from the entrance. A newer truck already sat out front, mud-specked, bumper dented. It looked like someone who worked. Inside, the air smelled like bacon and black coffee. A young waitress with too much eyeliner waved me toward a corner booth. "He's already here," she said, nodding toward a man sitting alone. I walked over, careful not to rush. Let him see me before I spoke. He stood as I approached, tall, maybe mid-40s, broad hands, calloused, shirt tucked in without trying too hard. He didn't smile like a salesman. He just nodded. "Mrs. Halpern?" he asked. "Agnes," I corrected. He nodded again. "Call me Lee." We shook hands. His grip was firm but respectful. No squeeze for dominance, just acknowledgement. "I hope this isn't too odd," I said, sliding into the booth. "I asked Carla to set this up because if I'm handing over my land, I want to know who I'm handing it to." "I understand," he said. "Honestly, I'm glad. Most folks these days don't care who buys, just what they're offering." We ordered coffee, no menus. He told me about his family, 3 kids, ages 6 to 12. His wife, Marin, teaches part-time at the county school. They'd lost a small plot 2 years ago to back taxes after a drought hit hard. He'd been working borrowed equipment ever since. "It's not the land that's hard," he said. "It's the waiting, never knowing if the bank's gonna let you breathe." I sipped my coffee. Strong. Burned a little going down. "You plan to work it yourself?" "Every inch," he said. "With help from the kids, eventually. I want them to know what it means to build something slow." That sentence settled in my chest like a stone in a river. Not heavy, just honest. We talked for half an hour. I asked pointed questions: crop rotation plans, soil preservation, runoff concerns. He didn't flinch, didn't lie. When he didn't know something, he said so. Finally, I reached into my bag and handed him the tin of cookies. He looked confused. "They're not a test," I said. "They're a peace offering." He laughed, just a little, opened the tin and took one, bit into it without ceremony. "My mother made these," he said through a mouthful. "Exactly these." "Then we'll get along," I replied. We stood. I offered my hand again. "One last thing," I said. "Don't tear the barn down, even if it starts falling." His brow furrowed. "I'd planned to rebuild it, but I won't tear it down." "Good," I said. "It remembers more than I do." Outside, the air had turned crisp. The wind carried the scent of alfalfa and old diesel. I stood beside my car and watched him drive off. No second guessing, no regret. Just the certainty that I'd chosen a man who'd treat the land like something living, not like an asset, not like my son. He pulled into the driveway in the same truck I'd seen at the diner. Still muddy, still dented, still honest. It was late afternoon, the kind of warm that clings to your clothes and settles in your hair. I was already on the porch, pitcher of tea on the table, 2 glasses sweating in the sun. Lee got out slowly, like someone taught by the land to move deliberately. His jeans were dusty, his boots real. No shine, no polish, just work. He stood there for a second, looking out at the field. Not at me, and I liked that. It meant he saw the land first. I stood and called out, "Still plan to work every inch?" He smiled, shaded his eyes with one hand. "Unless you've changed your mind." "I've signed the papers," I said. "But that doesn't mean I've handed over the keys." He laughed, met me halfway. We shook hands again, less formally this time. Not seller to buyer, more like neighbor to neighbor. Or perhaps the way people greet each other when they both know what it means to lose and build again. We sat with the tea. It was quiet at first. Neither of us filled the silence. That's how you know someone's real, when they don't talk just to kill the moment. After a few minutes, I nodded toward the field. The far west side, near the cedar grove. Soil's been temperamental since the floods in '94. It drains too slow. You'll want to watch for root rot. He took out a little notebook from his back pocket, wrote it down without interrupting. East fence was patched, but it won't hold forever. You'll need to sink a new post before winter. He nodded again, wrote more. The barn. I stopped, looked at it. It stood like an old soldier now, bent but not broken. Paint peeling, boards warped, doors never closing quite right. But it had housed livestock through 3 droughts, 1 tornado, and 100 disappointments. I know it looks tired, I said, but she's got 1 more decade in her if you treat her with respect. Lee didn't laugh. He looked at the barn like it had spoken. My youngest, Clara, he said. She's already calling it the Red Castle. Said she wants to read books up in the loft. Something caught in my throat. I covered it with a sip of tea. Your children been around farms much? I asked. Enough to know mud from manure, he said, smiling. Not enough to understand how much of their dinner depends on both. That made me laugh. We finished our tea and walked the property. I didn't point out everything. Some things you only learn by staying through a full season, watching the way the soil shifts after a thunderstorm, or how the wind sneaks around the silo just before winter sets in. Still, I showed him the practical parts. The tool shed lock that sticks unless you jiggle it. The sump pump switch in the cellar. The row of raspberry bushes behind the smokehouse that still yield if you prune them just right in spring. He listened like someone learning a song they plan to hum the rest of their life. At the gate by the pasture, we stopped. I'll move out in a week, I said. The upstairs bedroom and my things will be gone. But I'll leave the kitchenware. It's old, but it's got heart. You're staying on the land? He asked carefully. In the house, I said. As long as I'm breathing. He nodded. No hesitation. That was part of the deal, I added. Wasn't a condition, he said. It was a blessing. We stood a while longer, letting the silence settle between us like dust on boots. Somewhere, a hawk cried over the fields. The air smelled of grain and thyme. He turned to me and asked, "What made you choose me?" I looked at him. Not through him. Because you came to meet me in work boots, I said. Not a necktie. Because you brought your questions and not your opinions. Because when I said the land wasn't for sale, unless it stayed land, you didn't try to convince me otherwise. He nodded slowly, not with pride, but with understanding. And because, I added, my gut told me you'd raise something here other than your own net worth. He didn't answer, just looked out over the fields again. I didn't need him to say anything. He already had. We sat at my kitchen table, Lee on the left, Carla across from me. Papers spread out like a map of choices I'd already made. The house was warm. I'd turned off the fans so nothing would blow the pages. The air hung thick, scented faintly with dust, lemon oil, and something older. Memory. Lee sipped the coffee I'd brewed too strong. Didn't complain. Carla clicked her pen once, twice, the sound of someone waiting for permission. I've read the full agreement, I said, fingers resting lightly on the cover sheet. And before I sign again, I want us to be very clear. They both nodded, polite, professional. But I wasn't here to negotiate. I was here to speak plainly. This land is not a business to me, I said. It is not an investment. It's a life I built with my own 2 hands and buried half my soul in. I'm not asking you to honor that out of sentiment. I'm asking because I'm still alive. And I'm still here. Lee's jaw tightened, not from resistance, but respect. He didn't interrupt. So these are my conditions, I continued. They're not suggestions, and they're not symbolic. They're the price of my signature. I took a folded paper from my apron pocket and laid it flat. 1. I remain in this house as a resident, not a tenant, not a guest. No one will ask me to leave for any reason, ever. When I die, you may do with the house as you please, but not a moment sooner. Carla nodded. That's already in the paperwork with language to cover all. I'm not asking if it's legal, I said quietly. I'm asking if it's clear. Lee looked me in the eye. It is. I moved to the next line. 2. No subdivision, no parcels sold off for driveways, mobile homes, commercial storage, or side income. The land stays whole, or it goes back. That's enforceable through a land use covenant, Carla said, already scribbling notes. 3. No pesticides I wouldn't use myself. I've watched neighbors lose bees and crops to shortcuts. You farm how you want, but not at the cost of the ground beneath us. Lee nodded. We work organic already, been certified since 21. I kept going. 4. The oak tree stays. East field, near the ridge. No trimming, no cutting, no excuses. There's someone buried under it, and I won't have his grave disturbed because a fence needs realignment. Carla looked up, her face softening. Understood. I took a breath. 5. I want a bench built on the south hill overlooking the pasture. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just something steady, with a back. I'll pay for it myself. But when I can't walk far anymore, I want to sit and see what I've given away. Lee didn't write that down. He just said, we'll build it together. That one stopped me. Not because it was poetic, but because it wasn't. It was a promise. Simple, unpolished, real. I slid the paper across to Carla. Add it all? I won't sign until it's there in black and white. She nodded, adjusting her glasses. I'll update the addendum. Shouldn't take long. Lee finished his coffee and stood. I'll go walk the fence line while you two handle that, if you'll excuse me. I watched him through the window as he made his way past the tool shed, down toward the pasture gate. His gait wasn't fast, but it was sure, like someone moving forward for good. When Carla was done typing, I signed. Not with fanfare, not with ceremony, just ink on paper. It wasn't loss, it wasn't surrender. It was the closing of a door I'd held open longer than I needed to. Lee returned an hour later, his boots covered in dust and burrs. I saw 3 broken posts on the north side, he said. I'll be back Sunday to patch them. You don't own it yet, I said. He shrugged. Doesn't mean I can't care for it. I walked him to the porch, handed him the spare key, the one Daniel never wanted. You'll need this, I said. He turned it over in his hand, slow, like it weighed more than a house. I'll come quietly when the deed clears, I told him. No goodbyes, just moving upstairs. Lee looked out at the field, then back at me. I won't forget who kept this land alive, he said. And I believed him. Because some men talk legacy, but some walk it, boot by boot, row by row, and I'd just given it to the right one. The house didn't look any different that morning, but I did. I woke up before the sun, washed my face with cold water, and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. No emotion, no speech, just that same face I'd worn for nearly 8 decades, only now without apology. I'd packed everything the night before. 3 boxes, 1 suitcase, the rest would stay. The quilts, the mixing bowls, the worn Bible with James's handwriting in the margins. I wasn't dragging all that behind me like a history lesson. The new family would have a use for it, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't mine to keep anymore. At 7:30, a man from town came to help carry the boxes into my car. Carla had sent him. I didn't ask his name, and he didn't offer it. We didn't speak. He took one look at the house, nodded once, and did what needed doing. I locked the front door, slid the spare key into an envelope, and left it on the kitchen counter with a note. The water heater needs flushing come November. The wind through the west window whistles if you forget to latch it. Please don't move the rocking chair by the fireplace. That's where I sit when I need to remember who I am. I signed it. A. Halpern. It was the first time in a long time I signed my name without obligation, not for a check, not on a form, just as a mark that I had lived there. The road into town was the same, it's always been. Bumpy, familiar, lined with trees that hadn't yet turned gold for fall. I didn't look back. Not once. I'd learned a long time ago that looking backward doesn't stop anything from changing. The motel was nothing special. Low roof, faded red door, a dusty welcome mat that said, "Stay a while," like a suggestion, not a threat. Carla had booked it for me for the next few weeks until the formal transfer was finalized and I could move back in, as a resident, not an owner. That distinction didn't scare me. In fact, it freed me. The room was clean, one bed, one table, one chair, a window facing west. I set my suitcase down and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs gave a sigh like tired lungs. I stared at the wall for a while, not because I was sad, because I wasn't. That surprised me. I thought it would feel like grief, this in-between, but it didn't. It felt like the first deep breath after holding your head under too long. The quiet wasn't silence. It was space. Later, I walked to the diner down the road. Same one where I'd first met Lee. I sat at a booth in the back and ordered eggs, toast, and black coffee. "Would you like cream or sugar?" the waitress asked. "No," I said. "I want to taste it." When I returned to the motel, the afternoon sun had turned the sky a washed-out blue. I opened the curtains and watched cars pass by. None of them Daniel's. He hadn't called. I wasn't surprised. He wouldn't come until he was ready to demand something. Until then, the world turned without his permission. I sat at the table and wrote a letter, not to send, just to write. Daniel, you asked me once what I was waiting for. You meant it like an accusation, like I was wasting time. Here's your answer. I was waiting for you to see me. Not as someone who fed you, paid for you, answered your calls and your silences, but as a person, a whole one. I waited too long, so now I've stopped. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Not for him, for me. That evening, I took a walk around the block. An old man watering his front lawn gave me a wave. I waved back. "New in town?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just stepping out of the past." He chuckled, not understanding. That was fine. I wasn't telling this story for him. Back in my room, I changed into a soft nightgown, turned off the light, and lay down in the strange bed. The room smelled like detergent and nothing else. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of the farm or James or Daniel. I just slept. And when morning came, I woke to silence. The good kind. The gravel crunched under my tires the same way it always had, but the sound felt different now, like I wasn't driving home, just visiting. The house came into view slowly, framed by late summer trees just beginning to dry at the edges. The porch light was off. The gate was open. A child's tricycle leaned against the barn. For a moment, I sat there in the car, hands still on the wheel, just breathing. Then I stepped out. It had been 12 days since I left. Not long by any measure, but long enough for the silence to settle differently inside me. I walked toward the porch. The screen door was propped open with a rock. James used to do that when he didn't want the latch catching every time he walked in and out. I smiled without meaning to. Voices carried from the back. Children laughing. A dog barking once, then again. New life. I knocked on the frame, even though it was still my house. Maren answered. Lee's wife. She looked startled for half a second, then smiled wide and warm, brushing flour from her hands onto her apron. Agnes, she said. Come in, come in. We didn't expect you today. I'm not here to stay, I said. Just wanted to see it breathing. She laughed. Well, it's definitely doing that. I stepped inside. It was cleaner than I'd left it, not sparkling, just lived in. A towel tossed on the arm of the couch, a cereal bowl in the sink. Someone had moved the kitchen table slightly to the left. The curtains had been tied back. Sunlight streamed in, thick and gold. Lee's out with the kids, she said, pouring a glass of tea without asking. They're building a chicken run, or trying to anyway. He says you warned him about the foxes. I took the glass. I did. They'll find the coop before the chickens do if he doesn't anchor it right. She grinned. That's exactly what he said. I sat for a moment in my old chair, not the one by the fire. Not yet. Just one at the table. The fabric had a different feel to it. Someone had washed the cushion. A child's crayon drawing was taped to the fridge. I leaned forward. A red barn, blue sky, 5 stick figures holding hands. Clara drew it, Maren said. Said this is our forever farm. I nodded slowly. The phrase caught something in my throat, but I swallowed it down. You kept the pie tins, I said, spotting them stacked near the stove. Of course, she said. They still bake even. Yours have soul. I let that sit for a while. Just watched the light shift across the tile. Would you like to see the upstairs? She asked gently. We haven't changed much. Just painted the spare room for the boys. Not today, I said. I'm not here for memory. Outside, the dog barked again. Footsteps approached from the side of the house. The screen door creaked open, and Lee stepped in, wiping sweat from his forehead with the hem of his shirt. He froze for a second, then smiled when he saw me. Well, he said, guess we didn't scare you off yet. I stood slowly. Not yet. But don't get too comfortable. He laughed, and we shook hands. His palm was calloused, warm, familiar in a way that didn't need explanation. The bench is half built, he said. Hope that's all right. We couldn't find the right lumber for the backrest, and I figured you'd rather wait than have it splinter on you. I would, I said. Thank you. Come see? He asked. I nodded. We walked past the barn. Its doors open now, the air inside full of hay dust and hammering. His boys were there, 2 of them, trying to hang a pulley system with more enthusiasm than skill. They'll figure it out, Lee said. Eventually. We kept walking toward the South Hill. At the top, just where I'd asked, stood a half-finished bench. The frame was solid, heavy. The view stretched out wide, fields, fence lines, a distant tractor dotting the horizon. I stood still, hands in my pockets. This where you sit? He asked. It will be, I said. When the time's right. He nodded. No more questions. We stood there a while, just looking. Then I turned to go. You don't have to ask to come back, Agnes, he said, as we reached the porch again. This is still your home. No, I said gently. It was my home. Now it's your future. That's a different thing. I left without tea, without fuss. On the way back to the motel, the road didn't feel like a farewell. It felt like watching something bloom you'd once planted. Quiet, slow, full of roots. He arrived late in the day, unannounced, as he always did, like the farm was a layover between real places. The motel phone rang around 4:20. I didn't answer. I was peeling an apple, slow and even, watching the skin fall in one long curl into the sink. I let it ring. Then again. Then a third time. Finally, silence. A knock came 20 minutes later, 3 sharp raps, then one softer, like he thought better of it halfway through. I opened the door halfway. He looked tired, travel-slicked, city skin pale from office lighting, dark circles under his eyes, a rolling suitcase behind him, a phone still in his hand. "Why are you here?" I asked. He blinked. What do you mean? This is where you're staying, right? I called. You didn't call. You rang a phone. He exhaled sharply, like a man already tired of being misunderstood. I just landed. I went to the house. It's different. Yes, I said. He waited for me to go on. I didn't. What's going on? He finally asked. Why aren't you at the house? It's no longer mine. He squinted like I'd spoken in another language. You said we'd talk when I got back. I did, I said. But I changed my mind. His jaw tensed. You sold it? Without me? I didn't need your permission, Daniel. He stared at me for a long moment, then took a step back, as if the hallway gave him more leverage. After everything, he said. After all I offered. You just gave it away? I almost laughed. No, I said. I didn't give it away. I sold it. At value. With terms. To someone who'll treat it like land, not leverage. He looked off toward the parking lot, as if it might explain me better than I could. I had plans for that property, he said. I know, I replied. He looked at me again, searching for guilt. You should have waited. I stepped back toward the room. I did, Daniel. For years. He didn't follow. Just stood there in the doorframe, suitcase at his side, as if waiting for the scene to change. It was supposed to be mine someday, he said. No, I said. It was never yours. It was only ever mine. He ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, Mom, you're being emotional. No, I said calmly. I'm being clear. A silence fell. Not hostile, just wide. Like a truth finally laid bare between us, too large to step over. You can come in, I offered, but only if you want to speak to me, not to the idea of what you think I owe you. He didn't move. I let the door rest on its hinge, half open, half closed. I'll be at the farm next week, he said. They said you're staying in the house? As a guest, I said, of the people who now own it. He looked as if he'd swallowed something bitter. I don't understand you, he muttered. I met his eyes. That's not new. He left without a goodbye. I closed the door, turned off the light, and sat by the window. The phone rang once more that night. I didn't pick up, not out of anger, but because finally, I had nothing left to explain. He showed up the next morning, earlier than I expected. Still wearing the same clothes, suitcase in the car, jaw set like stone. I saw him through the window before he knocked, pacing the porch boards, rubbing his forehead like the motion might conjure better words. I opened the door before he could knock again. Come in, I said. He stepped inside, not with gratitude, but with that stiff-backed posture he always used when entering a room he thought he owned. He didn't sit. I didn't offer. You had no right, he said, eyes sharp, voice low but trembling. I had every right, I answered, calm. You sold it without even consulting me. I informed you, I said. You just didn't listen. He stared at me, mouth opening, then closing again. I poured coffee into 2 mugs and set them both on the table. Only one of us sat. I'm your son, he said finally. This wasn't just your decision. I tilted my head. Do you remember the year after your father died? He blinked. What? You were 20. You came home for 4 months. Promised to stay through harvest. I had to go back. I got a job. You left before we finished fencing the west field, I said. I carried that wire alone. Do you remember? His mouth opened again, but no answer came. Daniel, I said, you don't get to be absent for 25 years and then demand a seat at the table. He pointed a finger toward me, small, trembling. You should have trusted me. I did, I said. Far longer than I should have. He laughed once, a bitter sound. You think this is some victory? Giving it to a stranger? Letting some hick take over what should have been our legacy? I looked at him. Really looked. All his expensive shoes, his polished phone, his 1,000 little successes. And none of it taught him how to plant anything that stays. Lee is not a stranger, I said. He's a man who listens, who works, who teaches his children to get dirt under their nails. He's not family. He doesn't have to be, I said. You are. But family's not a pass, Daniel. It's a chance, and you've never once taken it. He paced the room now, hands on his hips. I was trying to help you, he said. Trying to get you out of that place before it broke you. It didn't break me, I said. It made me. He looked toward the window. You don't understand what it could have been worth. I know exactly what it was worth, I said. That's why I sold it the way I did. He turned back to me then, something in his face hardening. I hope it was worth losing me, he said. I stood up, slowly. Don't make this uglier than it is, I said. He waited, defiant. You think I sold the farm to hurt you? I asked. No. I sold it to free myself. He flinched, just slightly. That was the first truth that landed. I'm not your project, I continued. Not your old burden to be managed. I am a woman who raised you, fed you, forgave you, and watched you grow into someone who no longer looks me in the eye without a transaction in mind. That's not fair, he said, quieter now. Neither was the last 30 years, I said. But I still showed up. Every time. He looked down, then away. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. A dog barked in the distance. I didn't come here for a fight, he muttered. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't think I'd fight back. Silence stretched between us. Then he reached for the mug I'd poured earlier, took a sip. Set it down. His hands were shaking. I don't know who you are anymore, he said. I nodded. That's because you stopped asking a long time ago. He left without finishing the coffee. I didn't stop him, didn't call after him, didn't cry. I just cleared the mugs and let the silence have its say. The house had settled into its new rhythm. I could feel it in the floorboards, less tension in their creak, like they no longer waited for something to break. The air moved differently, too, now filled with small sounds. Children's voices outside, a hammer tapping in the barn, laughter over spilled feed. And me, still here, not as owner, not as matriarch, but as witness, as woman. I kept my routine simple. Up by 6, tea before breakfast, a walk around the perimeter of what I still called mine in my head, though I no longer clung to the word. I checked the gate latches, out of habit. Watched the chickens roam. Sat on the porch swing, watching the clouds like I used to watch weather reports. Sometimes Lee stopped by the porch on his way back from the field, wiping sweat from his brow with a folded handkerchief, just to say, "Afternoon, Agnes." He never asked questions he didn't need answers to. Marin brought fresh bread twice a week, always warm, always wrapped in a cloth that smelled faintly of lavender. She never lingered, but she always asked, "Need anything?" And I'd shake my head with a small smile. Not because I didn't, but because what I needed now was space, and I had it. Clara brought me drawings, horses with wings, barns floating on clouds, a sun that always smiled. One day she asked, "Did you live here a long time?" "Yes," I said, "a whole lifetime." She looked up at me with big brown eyes. "Then why'd you leave?" "I didn't," I told her. "I just moved over a little." She nodded, as if that made perfect sense. Sometimes I miss the way it used to be, but never the weight of it. Not the worry about repairs, not the years I spent waiting for calls that never came, visits cut short, or promises that dissolved before they reached my ears. I had grieved that version of my life already. Now I was learning what it meant to simply live it. I planted tomatoes in a half-barrel near the porch, watched them grow, fed the birds, read paperbacks I'd once told myself I didn't have time for. I wrote letters I never mailed. To Ruthie, to James, even to my mother, whose hands I'd never stopped missing. The bench on the hill was finished now, solid oak, anchored deep. Lee built it with his eldest son, and when they were done, he brought me up there in the flatbed, helped me down, and didn't say a word as I sat. I go there most evenings now. The view is still mine, even if the deeds say otherwise. The fields roll out like they always have, amber in the light, whispering with wind. The barn roof still leaks, but it stands. The fence needs paint. The world, as always, keeps needing things. But me? I need less now. Just the sound of my own breath. Just the knowledge that I chose. Just this quiet, steady dignity that no one gave me. I built it. With calloused hands, with silence where shouting could have lived, with decisions no one else dared call final. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for Daniel, not for closure, not even for time. I'm living what remains. And finally, it feels like mine. The bank hadn't changed in 20 years. Same brittle carpet, same fake plants gathering dust in the corners, same too cold air that made your joints ache if you stood still too long. I stepped inside, wearing the green blouse with the mother-of-pearl buttons, the one I used to save for Sunday services. I didn't dress up for them anymore, but I still believed in dressing with intention. Today called for it. A young man behind the counter looked up and smiled like I was a nice break from whatever screen he'd been staring at. "May I help you?" "Yes," I said, setting my purse on the desk. "I'd like to close an account." He gestured to a seat. "Of course. Let's take a look." I gave him the account number, wrote it down in my best penmanship. No fumbling for apps, no passwords, just paper and certainty. He typed something, then looked up. "Mrs. Halpern, are you sure? This account's been active a long time." "I know," I said. "I opened it with my husband. 52 years ago." He blinked. "Oh." The word hung there, embarrassed. "James Halpern," I added, just so it wouldn't feel like a mistake. "He passed in '93. "I'm sorry to hear that." I nodded once. "Thank you." He clicked a few more keys. "And what would you like to do with the balance?" "Transfer it to this account," I said, sliding a second slip of paper across the desk. "In my name only. No joint, no beneficiaries. No one else's hand in it." He paused, then nodded slowly. Understood. He printed out the forms, slid them toward me. I took my time signing, name by name, date by date, line by line. Each signature a little quieter than the last, but firm, steady. This wasn't about money, it was about clarity. When I finished, he collected the pages, tapped them into a neat stack. I'll process this today. You'll receive confirmation by mail. I'd like a copy now, I said. He blinked again, then nodded. Of course. He disappeared to the back. While I waited, I glanced around. Same posters on the wall about retirement planning. Same quiet buzz of the printer behind the teller booths. A woman my age sat in the far corner with her daughter, whispering about accounts, about how much to move, about what was safe. Safe. That word had ruled my life for so long. Safe decisions, safe sacrifices, safe silences. But safe had a price. It always does. The young man returned and handed me the folder. I took it and stood. As I turned to go, he said, "It's rare these days. Someone coming in to make a decision without anyone else weighing in." I looked at him. Not unkindly. I've spent most of my life being asked what I think after the decision was already made, I said. This time, I asked myself first. He smiled. A little smaller this time. A little more real. I walked out into the sun, folder under my arm, breeze lifting the edges of my blouse. The parking lot smelled like hot pavement and cut grass. In the driver's seat, I opened the folder again. Read the final confirmation. No one else's name, just mine. Agnes Halpern, that's all. That's enough. She knocked just after dinner, holding a half-covered casserole dish and an apology in her eyes. "Agnes," she said, "I wouldn't bother you, but I don't know who else to ask." It was Nora, from the house down by the creek. 10 years younger than me, but already walking like she carried too much. I let her in without a word, set the kettle on the stove. She placed the casserole on the counter and twisted the dish towel in her hands like it might unravel an answer. "It's my daughter," she said. "Emma. She's back from Chicago. Left her job, her boyfriend, everything." I nodded once. "She's angry," Nora continued, "at everything, me, mostly. Won't say it, but I feel it in every silence." I poured the tea, 2 cups, no sugar, no lemon, just the kind that warms your hands and slows your breathing. "She's upstairs crying right now," Nora said, voice low. "I tried all the mother things. Nothing landed. But then she saw you once, weeks ago, at the feed store. And after, she said, 'That woman looked like she's been through hell and still knows what she wants.'" I smiled faintly. "That accurate?" Nora blinked quickly. "I thought maybe if you could talk to her. Not fix her," she added fast. "Just sit. Say something she might remember when it counts." I thought for a moment, then reached for my cardigan. "Let's go." The house was quiet when we arrived. Too clean. Like someone had scrubbed it out of guilt, not pride. Nora led me upstairs, knocked gently. A voice called out, "What?" "It's me," Nora said. "And someone else." A pause. Then the door opened. Emma stood there, arms crossed, sleeves of a sweatshirt pushed to her elbows, hair in a knot that hadn't been washed in days. She looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. "This is Agnes Halpern," her mother said. "I know who she is," Emma muttered. I nodded. "Mind if I sit?" She stepped aside without answering. The room smelled of lotion and dust. A small window cracked open, breeze lifting the corner of a postcard on the desk. I sat on the edge of the bed. Nora lingered at the door. "I'll leave you two." And just like that, it was quiet. Emma leaned against the dresser, arms tight across her chest like a shield. I didn't speak for a while. When I finally did, I said, "Do you know how old I was when I buried my husband?" She shook her head. 45. Her face shifted, less guarded now, just slightly. "He died on a Thursday," I said. "By Sunday, I was fixing the back fence because the cows didn't care about grief." Emma's eyes welled up, but she blinked it back. "Not ready." "That's all right." Everyone told me to take time, to rest, but no one offered to feed the animals. No one paid the bills. She swallowed hard. "I don't know what you lost," I said gently. "But I know the sound of something breaking and no one noticing but you." That got her. She slid to the floor, legs crossed, arms falling to her sides. "I thought I knew what I wanted," she whispered. "We all do," I said. "Until it leaves, or disappoints us, or shows us it was never real to begin with." Silence stretched between us like a shared breath. "I don't want to go back," she said, "but I don't want to stay either." "You don't have to know today," I told her. "You just have to survive it." She nodded. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Are you lonely?" I smiled. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to be." She looked confused. "I used to be lonely even in a full house. Even at Christmas. Even when people needed me." She waited, quiet. "Now," I said, "I'm alone sometimes, but I'm never uncertain." Emma sat with that, like it was a language she half remembered. I stood to go. "Your mother's waiting. You don't have to talk to her yet," but she left the door open. Emma didn't speak, but as I passed her, she touched my arm. Just lightly, enough to say, "I heard you." Downstairs, Nora looked up with wide eyes. I nodded. "She'll be all right," I said. "Because of you?" "No," I said. "Because she was already halfway there. I just stood in the way of the silence." And sometimes, that's all we're meant to do. The wind came up from the south that morning, gentle, warm, full of hay and sun. I sat on the bench Lee built, the oak behind me casting long, quiet shadows across the pasture. The earth below was dry, but not brittle. It had rained 2 days ago, enough to give the corn what it needed. I could see the rows from here, green lines reaching toward horizon, the way a body reaches toward rest. This is how the land thanks you, not with words, not with ceremony, but with rhythm, with breath, with growth where loss once lived. I ran my hand over the back of the bench, solid, honest. The grain of the wood warm from the sun, a single screw slightly raised. Lee said he'd fix it, and I believe he will. Below, I could hear the children laughing, a dog barking, someone calling for a hammer. Life. Again. Still. Daniel hasn't called in 3 weeks. I don't expect him to. And the strange thing is, I'm not waiting anymore. That used to be my whole life. Waiting. For James to come in from the field. For Daniel to come home from school. For someone to ask how I was doing and really want the answer. For permission. For peace. For proof that I mattered. Now I just sit here, and somehow that is enough. I see the barn, still leaning, but still proud. I see the house, the porch swing moving in the breeze. I see Marin hanging clothes with a rhythm I recognize, and Clara drawing in the dirt with a stick, unbothered by the dust on her knees. No one asks me to lead. No one asks me to leave. I just am. Some mornings I wake before the sun and watch the light come in slow over the east field. That kind of silence, the kind before anything begins. It doesn't ask anything of you. It just lets you be. And maybe that's what all this was for. not to teach anyone a lesson, not to make a point, but to carve out one place on earth where I could sit in stillness and say, I did not go quietly. I chose. I chose not to hand it over. I chose not to explain myself anymore. I chose to love something enough to let it live beyond me. And in that choosing, I found my way back to myself. If you're reading this, and you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever held your breath so long you forgot how it felt to speak, let this be your sign. You are not too late. You are not too small. You are not done. You are allowed to begin again, not because someone finally gave you permission, but because you say so. Sit. Speak. Sign your name. And if you've made it this far, if you've walked beside me through these pages, then stay a little longer. Leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs it. Let them know we're still here. Still strong. Still choosing. Always.